Hi, and welcome to OTH Sports View. I'm Times Herald Sports Editor Chuck Pollock. Since our last video a week ago, it was a perfect week for St. Bonaventure basketball. And as usual, I have the guests who cover both teams. On my right, JP Butler in his 7th year. And on my left, Jeff Madigan in his initial season covering the Bona women. And we'll start off with you, JP. JP, let's start with last week. The Bonnies had 2 wins, an impressive one over Ohio University, kind of more of a dare I say, dull, but workmanlike win over Vermont, but a nice way to head into a break.
Yeah, they go into the break on a 3-game win streak here and playing well, which is exactly, I think what they wanted going into this break. The last 2 games, I think you saw 2 things that are really encouraging at this point going into the layoff, and that's one, they're starting to shoot the ball better, which is key in both of those games. And 2, they're doing a better job of eventually getting that lead in the second half and holding it and sticking with it through the very end. So, in these last 2 games combined, they've shot 21 of 42 from the 3-point line, which is a huge step up from what they had been before, and really just the game before against UB, where they basically hit bottom from long range and went 2 for 21. So, and then 50% in the next 2 games, a lot of that key by Jaylen Adams. And then in both games, in Ohio, they have that stretch where they go from down 5 to up 17 and really sort of, run away with it from there. And then in the Vermont game, it's a tie game, 45-45 early in the second half. They have that big 26-10 run where they're shooting the ball well, playing well offensively, just as it had kind of been in that Ohio game, and they get a nice, pretty straightforward victory there too. So 3 straight to go into the break, that's definitely where they want to be right now, 6-2 overall.
One of the things that strikes me, talking about 3, is the way they're hitting threes. Suddenly, this is a team with 3 guys who can shoot the 3. Jaylen Adams, obviously, against Vermont had a marvelous game. Right. And before that, Marcus, we know what Marcus can do, but now with the freshman Caputo, you say, wait a second, this is a pretty potent group if they all start hitting.
Well, they do have that. It's just a matter of kind of finding more of the consistency with it. And we know, certainly that there are stretches where Marcus won't be shooting the ball well, and he's actually back in kind of one of those slumps, right now. But the good thing for this team is that they have other guys who they can rely on when somebody like Marcus is having this kind of cold stretch. Jaylen Adams is that guy right now. 2 great games in a row. He, 22, 6 and 6 against Ohio, and was, the one to kind of to spark that second half run to get him going. And that's just a great game overall against Vermont. Career high 28. 7 3-pointers, which is something we haven't necessarily seen out of him before. One off of tying the program record for threes in a game, which I certainly thought he was going to get. And then Caputo, off the bench is just, he's shooting 40-some% from 3-point range right now. And it doesn't, necessarily seem like it all the time because, it might just be 1 or 2, but it's 1 or 2 big ones. It was 3 big ones in the second half against Ohio. So the good thing for them right now is that they have a couple of guys that they can rely on for that. And if they just continue to have that consistency and find guys that can step up and do that, I think their shooting is going to turn around a little bit. They came into last week basically last in the A-10 and 3-point shooting, but if they start to find this a little bit more, that won't be the case going forward.
Interesting to me, and almost unheard of, an 11-day break for the Bonnies in December in the heart of the non-conference season. And I know coaches love to say, oh, I haven't even thought about who we're playing next. I don't know who we're playing next. And that sounds good, but Bona fans have been doing this all preseason, trying to figure out where they're going to get at the end of the non-conference session. Right. I'm guessing that it's hard not to look at the rest of the preseason, I should say non-conference season, and not wonder, okay, where are they going to be? And are they going to be in a little better shape even than last year when they head in?
Right. Well, here it's a long break. Like we said, this is probably the longest since I've been doing this. But they got a chance to kind of see where they're at now, 6-2. Even the 2 losses, they had leads and double-digit leads in those games that so they know there are games that they could have had if they just played a little better in the second half. This is a time where they can see where they're at and kind of see where they could be. And coming out of that break, they've got South Carolina State at home. That's a bye game. That's an opponent you look at as needing to be a victory. I think they're under 500-ish right now. And then you've got a tough game at Siena and then back home with a Niagara team that's going to be struggling here as well. So you look at it as, this is a team that really should be, should have at least 8 wins, I think, going into the conference season, if not winning out, which is something they stated they want to do, and getting 9. And they're certainly capable, I think, of doing that. The only thing is, last year they started out 7-2, and you looked at it, Maryland Eastern Shore at home, at winless Delaware, you look at, boy, they can certainly win out here, and then they lose those 2 games, and they kind of go in, they halt the momentum going in. They're 7-4 rather than 9-2. 9-2, I think, is possible. Same thing. We're looking at it the same way, but they, certainly have to avoid that all of a sudden letdown against South Carolina State at home, or maybe a not great performance out at Siena. But it's there for them. They said they want to do it, and there's certainly a chance to go into conference play with a lot of momentum.
Final question, any update on Jordan's?
Jordan Tyson looks like he's getting closer and closer by the day. He's practicing now. We see him at the games, obviously. He doesn't look like somebody who's really injured anymore. He doesn't have anything on the wrist anymore. I think now with him, it's just kind of getting him back into game shape, getting him shooting the ball and used to using that wrist and using that hand and everything. He could be back by Christmas, which is something we certainly would not have thought would be. Courtney Stockard still looks like he's a ways away. He's doesn't look like he's on that scooter anymore, but he still has the big boot on. And then even when he comes back, he's obviously hasn't been able to do anything aerobically, so that's going to take him some time. He's still a question mark. Jordan, I think, maybe by Christmas or a little bit after in the conference play, and that'll certainly be a nice boost to the front court and the team overall, and maybe at a time where they're playing well.
We'll talk next about the Bona women when we bring in Jeff. Jeff, it's been a pretty good first season for you, and last week a particularly good one, with wins over Georgetown, James Madison, and the University at Buffalo. Pretty satisfying week, I'm sure, for Jim Crowley and his Bona women.
Yeah, you can't do anything better than win. And they've done that 6 times in a row now, 3 times in the last week, all here at the Riley Center. And they want to protect their home court, as any team does. And so far, they've done that at the Riley Center this season. Big wins over the Big East in Georgetown, the CAA, James Madison, and last night in the MAC with Buffalo. And they'll see if they can continue to defend their home court this week when Penn State from the Big Ten comes in on Saturday.
I know you expressed some skepticism when this streak started and thinking, they could lose a couple in a row, and instead they've been impressive. Georgetown clearly was coming off a horrible season where they had a young team, but it was a very nice win. And James Madison, you couldn't leave the building not impressed with the way they play.
Absolutely. I mean, James Madison and Georgetown, very similar teams. They got teams who want to break out. They got tall girls who can rebound underneath, and the Bonnies were up to the challenge both nights. Now, did Georgetown and James Madison play their best? Play their best in those 2 games? No, but the Bonnies didn't play their best either, and I think they're just getting started. And the same thing happened, Wednesday night with Buffalo. That the Bonnies didn't play their best, but UB certainly didn't play their best either. And the Bonnies' best was good enough the last 3 games, and they hope to continue that streak.
Well, one of the thoughts is often that sometimes the team that's defending has a big hand in why a team doesn't look good. I wasn't at the game last night. I was watching your favorite football team's weekending feature on ESPN, but I couldn't wait to get home and look at the box. 32 points, and obviously they got to 30 very late in the game. Yeah. That's a very impressive defensive effort against a pretty good team.
Yes, absolutely was, and that's the kind of defense the Bonnies want to play, and Coach Crowley wants his team to play. Now, for us up on Press Row and the Media Row, it's not a very fun and exciting game to watch, but it doesn't matter how fun and exciting it is to Coach Crowley, just as long as the team wins the game. And 32 points, I mean, UB scored 6 points in the first quarter and 5 points in the second quarter, which automatically started getting some of the people on Press Row and in the SID office to be like, all right, what's the lowest amount of points they've ever scored? Because we were honestly thinking that UB was shooting horrifically at halftime, and they didn't improve it much in the second half. And they did get to 32, but the Bonnies, they kind of put in their reserves toward the end of the game and that sort of thing. Got some players some minutes that usually aren't playing a whole lot, and so they gave up some easy scores and that sort of thing. But I mean, that's a credit to the whole team. All 12 players played yesterday, and they all contributed in some way to the big win.
Defensively, that's this team's stock and trade,
Yep.
and Jim Crowley would say that. It's not necessarily exciting basketball, but with the exception of a Jessica Jenkins, maybe, this is not a program, even in its best years, that's had breakout scoring.
Right.
It has won with defense. So I'm sure in Jim's heart of hearts, he's good with where they are.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'd prefer to be 9-0 instead of 7-2, but you certainly can't win them all. But that said, that's the kind of defense he wants to play, and he wants his team to play. He wants to force bad shots. He wants to get good rebounds that lead to fast break points and that sort of thing. And so far, they've done that in the last week, and that's why they've won these past 3 games. And certainly comes another tough test on Saturday afternoon in Penn State.
Bonn went 2-0 without Katie Healy.
Right.
I'd like to think they'd have won last night had she not played, but it's interesting to me. Miranda Drummond, who was absolutely a star against James Madison, had a horrible game.
Yeah.
Nyla Reeder was pretty well invisible. In comes Katie off the bench, and they win that comfortably. I'm sure from Jim's standpoint, having 3 contributors like that you
Right.
kind of count on at least one of them to come up is huge.
Absolutely, and I don't think Katie played 26 minutes last night on her first game back from her. We're not even sure what her injury was. It was a foot injury. We're not sure if it was a sprained ankle or a rolled ankle or what it was. We don't really have any real. Nobody's come out and said what it is, and she said she didn't play the Georgetown and James Madison games, and Miranda and Nyla both stepped up in both of those games, and those two had pretty bad nights last night. Nyla only had 3 points, and I believe Miranda might have had 0. She might not have scored at all. I don't remember. And Katie came off the bench and she played well. And to Miranda and Nyla's, it was probably fatigue from playing so many minutes on Saturday and on Monday that just bled over, and the shots weren't going down, and the legs were a little tired, and so they have 3 days off coming before their next games. They got a chance to regroup, recharge, and get ready to go for Saturday.
Interesting to me, last year she just kind of made her way along and you could see the improvement. But all of a sudden, Mariah Ruff, as a sophomore, looks terrific.
Yeah.
And you can even see now McKenna Maycock making those same little steps that Mariah made last year, and that bodes well for the program.
It absolutely does. McKenna had a great game last night. She had 6 points off the bench, and Mariah had 9 points. She was in the starting line. She actually led the starters in scoring. It wasn't a very productive night from the starting lineup with Miranda and Nyla not having their best nights. Mariah had 9 points, and McKenna had 6 off the bench. And another player who really stepped up last night, who's really getting into a good role, is Matea Britbar, who had 10 points and 9 rebounds off the bench. And if the team continues to play like that, and they can continue to get that kind of production out of their bench. Now, like I said, their bench points were kind of diluted last night with the fact that Katie came off the bench, and that's not going to happen as we go forward. But their bench is continuing to be very impressive going forward, especially girls like Matea Britbar and Gabby Richmond, who will probably be back on the bench once Katie's back in the starter's role full time.
Final question, where would you like to see them be at the end of the non-conference season?
I don't know how many games do they have left non-conference. 2 losses would be nice. I think Penn State obviously will be a tough test, and then they get a week off before they go to Colgate. They have games against Niagara and Canisius still coming up. So that's right, the 4 games. Right. So let's put them at 11-2. That would be nice. I don't want to predict anything, but I'd like them to be 11-2 because it makes my job a little easier, for sure. It makes Coach Crowley's job a little easier, too.
Always much more fun to cover a winning team. We'll see you again next week on OTH Sports View.